What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm DJ.
And today we are going to cover the stunning rising rate of depression, anxiety, and meaninglessness amongst the youth of today. Coming from a place of sympathy and care, we just want to express first and foremost that, we're not here to judge or cast disparaging comments or anything like that. We really are here to help try and figure out the problem. And so today we'll be covering social psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, as well as another psychologist. And what is the name of that gentleman? Actually, let me take Camilo Ortiz was his name. And hopefully we'll be able to not only break down the causes of this major crisis, but also offer some solutions, at least the beginning of solutions. And so without further ado, we actually have a nice little intro that will get us kicked off here. So let's go ahead and jump on over right quick.
So most of these platforms, they start off amazing and wonderful. Let's have a platform on which 12-year-old girls dance. Like, what could possibly go wrong with that?
Yeah.
Or let's have a platform on which 12-year-old kids can send each other disappearing messages. I mean, who would possibly exploit that for nefarious purposes?
Yeah.
So it all seems fun and playful at first, but even if, most people are good, most people are honest, but what has happened is the digital transformation has meant that it doesn't matter what most people are because they don't count. What matters is the dynamics. And what the dynamics has done is super duper empowered the extremists on the far left, the far right, foreign intelligence agents, and trolls. Those four groups now are super empowered to do what they want. And the rest of us are like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah.
What the hell is happening? And so this was an event at the Commonwealth Club where they talk about the anxious generation, the epidemic of childhood mental illness. The rates are staggering. Jonathan Haidt here, who we just saw speaking, is going to cover a series of graphs to demonstrate just how alarming the issue is. And then we're going to start drilling down into what he offers as potential solutions. We're going to follow that up with some more nitty-gritty detail in his appearance on the Trigonometry podcast, where he discusses with Konstantin Kisin and Francis over there a little bit more depth on the problems and solutions. And then we're going to get into an interview on Benjamin Boyce's podcast with Camilo Ortiz, a psychologist as well. And hopefully we'll be able to shed some light on the issue here and offer you guys some ways that you yourselves can begin addressing this issue if you have kids at home or young people in your life, which most of us do. So let's go ahead and let's get on ready to dive into this. So in our first clip here, we're going to look at the race for engagement that social media companies have been engaged in and what that has caused. Let's go.
And I think the key thing that John and CHT are both sort of interested in is how do perverse incentives and the lack of coordination to change them create a more problematic outcome for society? Because a race for engagement and the race to the bottom of the brainstem was predictably going to create a more addicted, distracted, lonely, sexualized society, because that's where the incentive takes us. But what John is offering us with his book is a crystal clear case of all of the research that makes it clear where those harms are showing up to make it definitive so we can hopefully make another choice. And before we start supercharging every perverse incentive we have in the world with artificial intelligence, we actually gave our AI Dilemma talk here in this very room about a year ago. It is so important that we are able to spot those perverse incentives before we push double exponential power through those perverse incentives. So with no further ado, I'd like to invite John Haidt, a very deep hero of mine and friend, up to the stage to give a presentation on some of that research. Thank you.
Okay, so here comes Jonathan Haidt. There's the little introduction, fam. And let's go ahead and jump forward a few minutes to the good stuff here. Let's go. So here's the book, The Anxious Generation, that Jonathan just came out. He's written a whole series of some really powerful work. You know, the happiness hypothesis, the coddling of the American mind, the righteous mind, among others. Look this gentleman up. This is powerful stuff. Here we go.
My argument, in brief, is that humans had a play-based childhood for millions of years, because that's what mammals do. All mammals play. They have to play to wire up their brains. But that play-based childhood began to fade out in the 1980s in the United States, and it was gone by 2010. And that's because right around 2010 is when the phone-based childhood sweeps in. Our children are now raised largely with a phone at the center of everything. And let's talk about what happened when that change happened. Another way I can summarize my book is by saying we have overprotected our children in the real world, and we have underprotected them online, and both of those are mistakes. So a month or two ago, Derek Thompson, a great data writer, in the data analyst in The Atlantic, had an article when the PISA scores came out. PISA is the one global assessment of how students are doing around the world. 15-year-olds, how are they doing academically? And what Derek pointed out, which people were seeing in this new data, is that scores in math and reading and those were all fairly steady. And then all of a sudden, after 2012, they drop. Yep. So that's international. Around the world, our young people are, I shouldn't quite say getting stupider, but they're not learning as much as they would have a few years before. I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Well, you know, when a certain thing happens and we're told to completely fear everybody else around us, and you can't go to school, you can't go to church, you can't do none of that because, you know, something or something might something grandma. Yeah. And, you know, and also there's the wearing the masks during that period of time.
Oh, that didn't
And there's
help.
a whole generation of kids that went through their like period of life where looking at face shapes teaches you how to communicate, and like not just to speak, communicate, but also like emotional hints and, you know,
Oh, yeah.
things that you show on your face. So we're going to have, you know, dude, another 10 years when those kids are like 12, 13, 14 years old.
They get into that on the trigonometry episode, which we're going to be covering here shortly as well. So now let's take a look at our national report card. This is interesting. Check this out.
And then Derek didn't include this, but this is another data set we have. This is called the Nation's Report Card, the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And here you can track what happened in the United States. From the 70s to 2012, it's slow. I mean, to raise the intelligence or the academic progress of an entire nation is really, really hard. But we were doing it. We were doing it, slow, steady progress in math and reading until 2012, and then it drops.
Damn.
Now everyone says, oh, COVID was so terrible. Yeah, and it was. And you can see that the drop with COVID is substantial. But the drop didn't begin with COVID. Our students began learning less after 2012.
Yep, there it is.
This is when the change happens. So now I'll transition to what my book is more about, which is the mental health. But my point is, across almost any assessment you want to make, Gen Z, born 1996 and later, is doing poorly. And it's
Okay, so he makes an important distinction there, that it wasn't just COVID. We definitely see a spike of movement around the time of COVID, but it is definitely begin around 2012. Okay.
Yeah. So bring that chart back up.
Yeah.
Or that he had there.
Want to see the last one, or you want
No, this one right
Okay,
here.
yeah.
This is interesting because, well, of course, there's the yellow.
Wait till he highlights these.
Yeah, the yellow hockey stick there. Well, my guess would be, well, psychological disorders. You know, it's obvious. It's, you know, the internet generation thing, and ADHD is on the standard curve that you'd pretty much think of in a modernizing world with more temptations to be short attention span.
For sure.
But then physical disability is interesting.
Yeah,
I wonder
you
if
see the
that's
rise even of ADHD. See, it was as a much slower incline prior to
Yeah,
2012, and then
well,
it really starts to have a
but
more
that,
rapid rise.
that would be the technological, like, you know,
Yes.
more kids have it. So the physical
Yes.
disability is interesting because remember, what was it, a few episodes ago, talked about, you know, like 1/3 of the kids are now obese and be diabetic.
Right, right. Yeah, we just talked about that, and I think that is actually, when I saw this chart, I think that is due to the food that we're ingesting, a lot of the physical disability, but also just because we're being generally more lethargic now,
You know,
spending more time indoors, less time in play.
after
and
2012,
sports
yeah,
and-
exactly. Nobody went
Yep.
outside to go play anymore
Yeah.
after 2012. That wasn't really a thing. They all started cloistering up.
Right. So let's hear Haidt break this down. Check this. Here we go.
It's very sudden. It happened very suddenly in the early 2010s. So we can see that I first saw this on college campuses. Greg Lukianoff actually was one of the first to spot it. Something was changing about students who arrived in 2014 compared to, say, those who arrived in 2012. Up through 2012, they were all millennials. But as we go on in the decade, you see a number of things rise a little bit. ADHD is up a little bit, learning disability up a tiny bit. But it's really this yellow line, which is psychological disorders. That's what rises fast. That's the big difference between Gen Z and the millennials, is that Gen Z has very high rates of mental illness, especially depression and anxiety.
Wow. Yeah, and that's a very marked rise for those of you that are just listening to this after the fact. Go ahead and look this video up on YouTube or on Spotify, where you can see the video version of this podcast, or just check the links in the description of this episode, and you can find the actual videos that we drew these from, so you guys can see these graphs yourself, because they are pretty shocking. So let's go ahead and continue on to a little bit more about that rising mental illness.
This is data collected from university health systems, and what we see is, so these are U.S. undergraduates with a variety of conditions, and all the graphs that I show, if you track the data up through 2010, you see nothing. That is, even in the 90s, and especially the 2000s, mental health was not getting worse, and on some measures it was getting a little better. The millennials actually were a little more mentally healthy than Gen X before them. Gen X is 1965 through 1980. But what you see as we go on into the 2010s is this. Everything goes up, but it's especially depression and anxiety. They are now at such high levels. It's just a normal part of being a teenager in the United States. These are college students, but it's just a normal part of being a young person now, that you are depressed and anxious. It's not that the majority is, but it's almost. I mean, it's around 30, 40%.
You know,
Feels that way, doesn't it?
I wonder how much of this is, you know, from being on the internet and the constant dopamine blasts and other stuff like that, and how much of it is a normalizing in culture the idea that, you know, oh, well, I have anxiety, I have depression. It's a thing in there. So you may not necessarily start out with it, but then you end up with it. There's a word for it. I don't remember what the word is.
Yeah, but it becomes a part of people's identities, and then they're projecting that out there for group belonging.
And then I wonder how much of it is, so we had the internet, and then you have the fad culture of it, and then you get the family of it. And I wonder how much of it is also family, because it's not just one or the other of any of them. It's a combination.
And the overprescription of SSRIs.
Well,
could
yeah,
also be
that's another component.
And the increase of, you know, amount of bad food that we're eating, the quality of the food continues to go down, 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 and the amount of hazardous chemicals goes up,
and
up,
then,
up.
you know, the dropping testosterone rate in young men, that could be part of
That
it
could
too.
be contributing.
That'll make you depressed and anxious.
So the plastics, the microplastics. So, okay.
Yeah, on a tangent.
So
an aside,
yeah, but you can also, okay, so let me bring this graph back up. Check this out. So you can also, where's my mouse? There we are. This is kind of hard to see. I know the mouse isn't showing up very well for you guys, but you see that it starts at 2010, the rise, but then it really takes off at 2012. That's right around the time that mass adoption of social media began to take hold, and Facebook bought Instagram, and Instagram really started to take off, and then shoo, does
That's
it
also
grow. And then you see the real big spike around COVID, of course, which is expectable, but then the rate continues to climb at that previous level.
Yeah, and also there's the aspect of around that period of time, the 2010 to 2014 is when a lot of this, super wackadoo intersectionalism and, the social justice stuff and, you have to mind your P's and Q's about everything now and again.
Became
That's when it's really started.
Prominent. It was pushed very heavily
Well,
during COVID. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about like 2010 to 2014.
Well, that was coming about.
That would match up with like the first or maybe second generations of teachers who were taught this stuff,
Yep.
and they've finally got out of college. There's enough of them, and now they're bringing it to the public
And then,
schools.
yeah, and what I meant was then
Yeah.
you're right though, and then it became mainstream around COVID because everybody was home, and the inundation of that kind of material really took hold around that time in a massive way. It just grew exponentially.
But the one blessing, if you will, within this curse, the COVID curse, was parents were at home with their kids and they were watching what the teachers were teaching them, and they got pissed off, and rightly so. Like, don't mess with my kids. That didn't used to have to be a thing that we have to push back against. It used to just be like,
Not
no,
so much.
you're not an activist at school. You're not a this, that, or the other. You don't talk about your wife or your husband. You don't do any of that. You don't even know your teacher's first name.
Really?
It used to be like that, and that worked. I'm sorry, but it did.
Well, a certain level of depersonalization is important. They don't need to know everything about your personal life, particularly your sexual proclivities.
Well, that's where
preferences.
community. If the teacher's a part of the community, the kid's going to know the teacher and know about
We
him.
should just treat that we accept people for who they are and judge people by their actions, not by their looks or orientations. So let's jump on over to this next bit here. Here we go. Where the mouse at? Come on.
Are depressed and anxious. This graph shows that it's actually just the young people, because as we go on in this period, what you see is that the lines for older people don't really change, but the youngest generation is really where the increase is concentrated. The rise is also gendered in a lot of ways. It's
That's
concentrated.
interesting. Let's go back here. So let's look at this. So we see the rise certainly happening massively for the 18 to 25 range since 2010. 92% increase. Ages 26 to 34, 62% increase. Not so much change for Gen X and the boomers because we haven't been habituated to be on the social media as much, but also because it was not there during our formative years when our brains were wiring themselves for adulthood. So this is where things really become problematic for people, is because our formative years have been miswired. Now, there is good news. The brain is incredibly malleable. The brain is plastic, as they say, so it can certainly change and rewire itself. But the most intense phase of wiring for our adult brains is certainly happening during the young, child through adolescent years. So let him go on here and finish this bit.
The rise is also gendered in a lot of ways. Boys and girls are doing much worse than they were before, but often the rise is larger for girls. Now, note, in this case, the percentage increase is actually slightly higher for boys, but they start at a much lower level. So they go from about 5% to 12% had a major depression in the last year. A big increase percentage-wise, but you wouldn't say, oh, boys, it's just normal for them to be depressed. They're not. It's 12%. Whereas for girls, it went from 12% up to nearly 30%. Which is a very large portion of our girls have had a major depressive episode in the last year. And I want you to notice, the data for 2022 just came in about 2 months ago, and I was able to add it to the graph. You can kind of see the COVID effect there if you look closely. Yeah. See? COVID made things a little bit worse, but it really it went right back to the trend line. COVID is trivial compared to whatever happened in the early 2010s.
Wow. Yeah. So there it is. There's that little blip, but it goes right back to the trend line.
Well, and that would make sense too, because like, say with kids that age, they would be in school and they would be dealing with like the bullying from their peers and to their peers that you do at school. And boys are very physical about that. Like they beat each other up. They, flush each other's heads down, down the toilet and, do that type of stuff. But the girls do entire life reputation destruction.
Yeah.
And if you have them all online, it's far easier to do that online than it is to say, like, physically, abuse somebody like boys do. Now you're still seeing a trend because, well, the boys are online too, and they're not doing what boys do and going up. But with the girl end, it's like, we gave them a loaded gun, and just, said, hey, go for it, do whatever, here you go. And the loaded gun was the internet and social media, and because that's all reputation. How can I build my reputation?
Yeah, this really, really impacted young women. And we see that 135% increase here since 2010. The rates of major depression in females, males and females, it's really gone up, but particularly alarmingly for young women and young girls. So let's go ahead and continue this now.
And it's not just that they're saying that they're depressed and anxious. When we look at measures of behavior, this shows it's actually emergency room visits, psychiatric emergency room visits. I'm sorry, not necessarily psychiatric. This is for self-harm. Emergency room visits for self-harm. Again, no trend before 2010, and then after 2010, girls go way, way up, especially preteen girls.
So this
the
isn't
CDC divides the data up into two age.
Right.
Yeah,
So this isn't just
10 to 14.
people replying to surveys. This is actually happening. These are emergency room admissions for self-harm, ages 10 to 14. 188% increase for girls since 2010. 48% increase for boys, but 140% more. 88% increase for girls since 2010. That's shocking. That's really sad.
We're not screwed, folks. We're just hitting a pretty bad blip. We can turn around from this.
Yeah, we can. So now we're going to look at the suicide rates, and this is not exclusive to the United States.
Age groups, the younger age group is almost always where you see the biggest percentage increase. Something really, really hit 10 to 14-year-old girls very hard in this country in the early 2010s.
Yeah.
And it's not just self-harm, it's also suicide, which boys commit more suicide than girls. They tend to use lethal means such as a gun or a tall building. Girls make many more attempts. But when we look at actual deaths, what we see is a very large and sudden increase. I mean, this is quite astonishing. Between 2012 and 2013, the suicide rate for young teen girls went up 67% in a single year. And it wasn't a blip. It wasn't like an error that it went down the next year. It was the first leg of a rise up to 134% increase.
Wow, man, look at that. So female suicides for girls 10 to 14 has increased 134% since 2010.
And now, mind you, this is, 2 per 100,000. So to get a better scope of it, we'd have to look up at like how many of this age group is in the countries, but still, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And you'd actually expect boys to have, I'm surprised actually it's at this age range, it's less. Boys have less than I would put them at.
Less of an increase, but they're still
well,
committing suicide
even just less total,
more often.
like a ratio from the girls. I expect a little bit more because boys are reckless and we're moody, and
well, this just shows you why
Yeah.
this is such an issue because we don't typically see this in girls. The suicide rate has never been as high as boys, and to see it increase as it has, especially so drastically in 2013 alone, there was a 67% increase in 1 year. Something is happening.
And actually, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the numbers are probably a little bit higher too, because this is CDC fatal injury reports, but there might be a lot of stuff that are like not accounted for one way or another. CDC is getting less and less reliable by the day. They tend to lower the numbers when it looks bad and raise the numbers when it suits them.
Yeah, and we
So
don't know
just
that
keep that with a
that's
grain
the
of
case
salt.
here, but we ourselves are not experts. We're following the experts.
Yeah, just widen your error percentage
Consider it might be higher.
expectation
Yeah.
or lower
Yeah.
too as well.
Right.
But I've been digging through CDC numbers and they're
Unreliable at best.
yeah.
So let's go ahead and continue on here and let him finish this one. Because now he's going to go on
And it's not just us. It's happening in very much the same way in all of the English-speaking countries.
Yep, other countries.
This is Britain for self-harm. We see the same pattern.
Oh, man.
And this is Australia, psychiatric emergency department visits. Again, no trend before 2010, and then afterwards way up for boys and for girls. Same in New Zealand. Similar data from Scandinavia. It's not all over the world. We don't see this in East Asia, but it is all over Northern Europe and the English-speaking countries and North America.
Yeah, and so there's
Now,
that.
why?
Okay, so the why we're going to get into now, and this is where Haidt speaks on the great rewiring of our younger generations.
Why would this pattern be happening in so many countries at the same time? Everyone has a theory. People hit me with all kinds of theories to explain it. And I say, fine, that might work for the United States, but why did that cause girls in Australia to start cutting themselves? It doesn't make any sense. And I think there is really only one theory on the table. I keep waiting for someone to propose another. Nobody has, which is what I call the great rewiring of childhood. It happened in two phases, as I said, the end of the play-based childhood and then the birth of the phone-based childhood.
Yep, and there it is.
Play versus fun-based childhoods.
Yeah.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense because it's like, I remember when I was a kid, when I had friends around, I wasn't the most social kid, but instead of like, let's go out and have fun, it was let's go out and play. You want to go out and play, but it's like now it's, you want to have fun? What do you mean by that? And play. Fun is a feeling that you have. Play is an essential mechanism for the development of mammalian creatures, social and physical. Social and individual. You're honing your body, but then also you're building relationships with the people that you're playing with.
Yeah. And I just noticed, Grapno Girl, thanks for your comment over on Twitch. She stated, to be fair, that's only 10 to 14. Imagine if you increased it by a couple of years, you'd have an even bigger jump. And yeah,
Sure.
We agree. That's exactly right, because that's what we saw when he showed us the other countries.
Well, yeah, so to address that, what I've seen in statistics is this would be like they're trying to tighten up the years so you can actually have a more useful bit of data.
Mm-hmm.
And, there is funny business that happens from time to time where they'll like include children or, children up, or like they'll say like teenagers, and they'll include 18, 19, even though they're like adults, and they'll put it in there. So like, particularly with, like gun violence and other stuff, statistics, you'll see more of that.
And that's
So
a
I
tricky
think
one. You can understand why that would happen.
I think it's better if we keep our age ranges narrow, but not so narrow that you can't actually see trends. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
for sure.
we would see we would definitely see a bigger thing. And we're going to, like, as you go up and then give us another 5 years.
Yeah,
we're gonna see it,
absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go ahead and let's continue on now, because he's now going to get into how the adoption of technology really has exacerbated this whole issue, and try to get us to the right point. Bada bing, bada boom.
We're going to have a sound button for these moments,
Yes.
just so you know.
Soon, it's coming.
Conversation.
Checklist chart.
Something I didn't realize until I really got deep into writing the book.
This is so
you find this graph at Our World in Data. They graph out how adoption of various technologies, and there's, for communication technologies, because they're network issues, there's always a brief period where everyone is getting it. Once some people are getting a telephone, you have a point, everyone now is getting a telephone, that sort of thing. And what we see is that the first wave, the personal computer, so many older people like me remember when you got your first IBM PC, or out here, I guess you would have gotten a Mac, whatever. So that was adopted, and you could do WordStar and other things like that. But it's not until you get dial-up internet that it really becomes useful, and then that rises very fast in the 90s and into the 2000s. And that first wave was wonderful. It was magical.
It was.
It didn't do anything bad to mental health. It corresponded with the period of the greatest growth in democracy ever. So we were all techno-optimists. This stuff is great, isn't it? But it's this second wave.
It was just a
this
tool then.
is what did in Gen Z, at least in my telling in the book. It was the beginning of social media, which we used to call social networking systems, because it was a way you would just connect and you'd share your profile. Social networking systems are adopted very, very rapidly, even before the smartphone. But once the smartphone comes out as well, those two together are by far the fastest technological adoption in history, although I think maybe ChatGPT might have been faster. I don't know. I don't have the data.
Yeah, but that would be interesting to see on the chart as well. So this is a fascinating chart. So you see how fast radio was adopted once it became accessible to people. Now everybody has radio. Color TV became adopted, and it stays quite high. You see personal computer was adopted at an incredibly rapid rate, eventually evened out. The internet's continuing to be adopted at an incredibly rapid rate. Look at how much faster the internet's rises. It's almost a straight line compared to these other guys. But then you get to social media, massively adopted before there were even smartphones. Facebook and MySpace were around. And then smartphones came along. Bada bing, bada boom. It's just an insane rise.
I wonder
The
if,
adoption of the tech.
I wonder if this, this thing that we're observing happening is part of like the great filter in the Fermi paradox. Like,
Oh boy.
in order
Yeah.
to become like a starfaring race, you have to get past certain filters. And
You got to be
I
able
would
to
venture,
learn.
I'd venture to say this is one, because if we can't handle high speed networking between human individuals, at an ever increasing rate, we're not going to be able to get to other places. It's just like we're finding out you need that technology. You need really good communication, and
That level of that speed and that fidelity of communication to be able to
'Cause it's all just
build and operate the next technologies that could make
Yeah.
us a multiplanetary species.
So maybe that's maybe this is a great filter event.
Certainly seems like it. We get these increasing challenges here where each one is harder and faster than the last, for us to be able to learn how to handle responsibly. And now we are on something that is on such a rapid growth rate that it is kind of getting out of hand for us. And we must learn fast before it really takes us over and changes the way that we operate ourselves civilizationally too drastically to turn it back around. So a little bit more for this clip here. Let's finish this one out.
But this transformed things just in the blink of an eye, and this is exactly when teen mental health plummets, and also democracy, which may or may, democracy reached a high point around 2011, 2012, and now it's been drifting downward, the number of democracies and their quality.
That's
globally.
interesting. That's very interesting. So what did he say there again? Let me hear the dates.
Reached a high point around teen mental health plummets. Now it's been drifting downward. The number of democracies may or may, democracy reached a high point around 2011, 2012, and now it's been drifting
2012,
downward. The number of democracies and their quality.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that that's getting to we're in deep with the Middle Eastern issue globally.
Yep.
Like it wasn't just Americans that were in the Middle East. The whole world just turned in on that area and decided to do their battles there and make their money, and there was plenty of different people that wanted to fight for one reason or another to get them to fight.
Yep.
And then we're all watching it happen on the interwebs. Yeah.
Yep. It's interesting, to say the least. So now we're going to look at childhood play versus solitary confinement with our smartphones and how that's affected us.
Oh,
Now go ahead.
that just gave me an idea. Would you rather be no cell phone, no smartphone, no none of that, but you live in the most beautiful area and there's places where you can go to the arcade and see movies and have crazy VR stuff and everything, but you're not allowed to have a smartphone or any home computer or anything like that? Or would you rather be imprisoned and you have
You still get to
a
keep your
nice
smartphone
computer,
and
good
video
smartphone,
games and
the best cameras to
Yeah.
take pictures of yourself? Which ones would you
movies.
choose? Yeah. So
Yeah, that's an
I
easy
wonder.
decision for me. I know that I'd take the first.
I would chuck the phone, man.
I think
any
I think
day.
we would see some people take the latter now.
Well, there already are. That's kind of like the point of what I was saying is really we are, and particularly kids that don't know any better, don't know what getting up really early and going to the top of the hill and seeing a sunset and smelling the dew and feeling that
You mean the sunrise? Yeah, get up early
no,
and see the
just-
sunrise.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yes.
You got me there. I thought you were gonna do the
No.
one bright day in the middle of the night.
No.
Two dead men stood up to fight.
No,
back
no.
to back, they faced each other, drew their swords, and shot each other. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just dyslexic, so
If you do not believe my lie is true, ask the blind man. He saw
saw
it
it
too.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ain't that good.
All
I
right.
just mess up talking.
All right. So check this, guys. Childhood play.
So I'll just, just to illustrate, childhood used to be, all of older people, I'm sure your fondest memories are not, with your parents, and they're not sitting watching TV. They're probably you're outside playing, you're having adventures. It used to be just for younger people in the audience. If you look at the bottom left picture, it used to just be a thing that you could ride around town in a bicycle with an extraterrestrial in your basket. It's just something. It's just something.
E.T. is a picture of the movie E.T. where the young main character has the alien riding in his basket on the front of his bike. But we used to all ride our bikes everywhere. That was like our freedom. And every single day we were going somewhere different, meeting each other on our bikes at friends' houses or shopping centers.
That's a big moment for a young person when you first get your
down
first
the
bike.
trail in the woods. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, I can finally keep up with my friends and they're not making fun of me anymore.
Yeah, but that was our freedom. That was our freedom. And it was adventure. There's a lot of adventure. So
dude, man.
Continuing on.
That we did. Whereas now, childhood is basically this. If you're a boy and you want to play video games with your friends, you have to go home alone. You can't go over to your friend's house. You need your headset, your controller, your screen. So childhood now is much more solitary than it ever has been in human history, and the results, I think, are not good. So there are so many different avenues of harm. In fact, in our brief time, I barely have time to just read them. I'll just read them for the audience listening in. Normally, if I had the full hour, I would go through them. I'll just read them. The opportunity cost: kids are on for 9 hours a day, 5 hours a day of which is social media. Social deprivation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, behavioral addiction. Those affect everyone, boys and
Yeah, boys and girls. That affects everybody. So there's the 5 foundational harms. Opportunity cost, 9 hours a day on average. Social deprivation, time with friends, is down 65% since 2010. Can you imagine? Sleep deprivation up sharply since 2013.
Yeah.
Attention fragmentation, inability to stay on task. And behavioral addiction is up 2 to 10%. God. All right, so now we're going to look at the harms to girls and then the harms to boys, how this breaks down.
And girls. Then I have a whole chapter on why social media harms girls more. Girls are more sensitive. Boys and girls are just a little different in their social needs. And so I'll just list them. Visual social comparison, perfectionism, relational aggression. Girls share emotions more than boys, including anxiety and sadness. Girls are more susceptible to sociogenic transmission, especially via TikTok. And girls are more subject to sexual predation and harassment. It's just more part of your daily life online, if you're a girl, that you're approached by older men with bad intent.
God damn. Okay. So the visual social comparison, Instagram is the worst for that.
And so,
relational aggression,
normally what they,
perfectionism.
with one, visual social comparison, what they would do is, in the school ground and stuff, you see Susie's braids or something like that, and you'd feel really good, maybe like you got your new shoes and you want to show them off to your friends, or the negative end of that, maybe, you're the poor dirty girl, that has very plain clothes and stuff. But that's way more preferable than the pressures and the way people can be destroyed online. And you have to now plastic surgery is available to everybody with a face filter. Just don't meet people in person.
I was about to say it's so much.
Yeah.
It's even worse now because of the filters. And
Yeah.
girls share emotions more than boys. And
Yeah.
guys, yes, there are differences in the sexes. But we can get into that another time. Girls are more susceptible to sociogenic transmission. TikTok is the worst for causing this.
Yeah, that Tourette
for example,
syndrome.
the TikTok Tourette syndrome. Everybody in Gen Z knows about that.
I've got ticks because I've been watching
And
the Twitter.
Girls are more subject to
ticks.
sexual predation and harassment online than boys are, but it does happen in boys, but certainly much more to girls.
Well, yeah, now and how do they verify your age for like a dating account?
Mm-hmm.
Like, really? And also, you put your entire life up on the interweb. That's a voyeur's dream. You know, they don't even have to get up to go peek through people's windows. You got the cameras in there taking pictures of yourself.
Well, the anonymity certainly helps predators as well. And that people are impressionable when they're young, so it's easy to be taken in by someone pretending to be something they're not. So now let's see how this is harming boys.
or part of your daily life online, if you're a girl, that you're approached by older men with bad intent. But the boy story is a little more complicated, not quite as obvious, but my research associate Zach Rausch and I think we worked it out pretty well, drawing on Richard Reeves' book of Boys and Men, that boys have just been withdrawing from effort in the real world since the 80s, 70s or 80s, and getting lured ever more into the virtual world, where they can get their desires for coalitional violence, that is war and sports, pretend, you can get your desires for that sort of play satisfied in video games, and your desire for sex from pornography. So boys are just retreating from the real world. So we get rising levels of porn addiction. Multiplayer video games take up a huge amount of time. They're great fun. They're incredibly immersive. And so anyway, the point is, boys' lives have been upended too. It doesn't show up as much in depression and anxiety. It shows up as just withdrawing from effort in the real world. Yeah. Boys are just not really doing the things, they're not making the efforts and experiencing the failures and setbacks that would strengthen them to grow into men.
Yeah, yeah. So retreating from the real world since the 70s.
Yeah, and that's
the virtual world now welcomes them, like Ulysses and the Sirens.
Yeah, so that's the hero's journey. That's that's the masculine hero's journey. It's going out, the call to adventure and going out. That's part of growing up. That's why we have so many, like older movies, like that, are, kids, they go out on the adventure, like, the Goonies,
Stand by Me,
yeah. Or Sandlot, or movies like that. And it's really important for young men to have a drive that makes them flee from their mother's arms,
and approaches the danger and finds a way to pacify it,
and then the virtual
and pacify the own monster within as well. Like Never Ending Story tells that very well.
So they're going on their adventures, but they're going inward, like this virtual world. So that's the Sirens.
Yeah,
getting pulled into that.
Yeah.
And then, you don't need to go talk to girls, because you can have some virtual thing or something that's just as good as far as, what your brain knows.
Yeah, porn addiction, equaling loss of drive and less skillfulness at talking to girls.
Yeah, and the online multiplayer video games, one of the reasons why they're so addictive yet isolating as well is like, it's a substitution for an actual social life. It's like, and I'm not knocking people that actually have bonded with, like, their gaming buddies that they've never met because one of them's off in Poland or something,
Sure.
I'm not knocking that, but that's not a replacement for human to human, man to man interaction. But it feels the same way.
When it becomes the point of an addiction and that's taken over your life.
Well, and males are more prone to addiction than females are too. So
because we are super addicted to those dopamine hits. And then we're noticing that young men are becoming irritable and unhappy when they're not online. They withdraw from family and school.
The moody emo kid.
Boys are failing to do the things that would turn them into men. Respectful men with virtue.
Well, there's no demand for them to become men, because okay, not to be that guy, but the masculine archetype is moving out and forward, but only because there's a demand, because, your parents aren't going to deal, or at least used to, they ain't going to deal with you for a certain period of time. You're also not going to want to stay in the same town. You want to go out there and adventure because, if you stay in the same town, you ain't going to amount to nothing. You're just going to do the same thing that your dad did,
and
his dad did, and his dad did.
Learning how to be independent, completely cut off from others, enables you to be able to be a better caretaker as you grow into adulthood.
Yeah.
So we have to go through these, what do you call them, journeys, these kinds of stages of growth.
Well, and there's a certain amount of...
we used to have rituals for this.
Yes, exactly. So like... not initiation. Well, maybe initiation rituals, into certain periods of your life that are marked by certain events or accomplishments. Like a good example is
surviving a hard ordeal of some sort.
Now it's
vision quest.
Graduate high school, and then
maybe a bar mitzvah.
And other stuff like that.
Sweet 16 party for girls and things like that.
But even like just 50, 40 years ago, there was still cultural traditions, and like it's in our media. If you look at old movies and listen to songs and stuff like that, it's these rituals that we're passing on to each other, but something really happened.
They have really been dying off in recent generations.
when they've
They
been
used
replaced
to
with
be
something.
central, hundreds of years ago. They were absolutely central to our survival as communities. You would send a young one out once they got to a certain age to go and get the skin of some animal that's really hard to hunt, especially for a kid, or go and survive for 7 days out in the wilderness and go sit on the edge of a cliff and find your true name. And you're not going to have any food or anything the entire time. So you got to figure out how to survive and make it through that.
Or even not too long ago, just a few hundred years ago, you go out and you live with say a blacksmith, a master blacksmith, and you learn from him,
Yes.
and it's your apprenticeship, and you go out.
Apprenticeships,
And then
yes.
once you're done with that, you're a journeyman, and you can go out even further. You know.
We got to glue some of this fabric back together.
Yeah, man. There's some holes.
There's some big holes in our social fabric. So now we're going to learn how, well, everybody doesn't like this. The young, the elders, nobody's happy with this situation. And so we're going to get now into that social dilemma. And if you guys haven't seen the documentary Social Dilemma, it is available on Netflix. Jonathan Haidt was central to that movie coming out. They used a lot of his data. It was organized by Tristan Harris. I do believe that he was a major part of that film as well in helping it come to being. The gentleman that introduced Jonathan in the beginning of this video that we're watching now. So definitely check out The Social Dilemma. It's designed so that you can watch it with your entire family. So even, your 8 or 10-year-old kids can watch this and understand what these social media algorithms are doing to us. So I thought I knew a lot about this subject when I watched that documentary. It blew me away. So absolutely must see. So let's go ahead and let's continue on now. And let's learn about the social dilemma.
The proposal, Tristan and I will talk about this, but there's actually a way out, because almost all the parents hate what's going on. All the teachers hate what's going on. All the principals and heads of school hate what's going on.
Yeah.
And guess what? Gen Z hates what's going on. They
Gen Z also hates what's going on.
see it. They're not in denial.
Yeah.
They really see that they're trapped. And you say, well, why do you waste your life this way? Why don't you just get off? I can't, because everyone else is on. So it's a social dilemma. It's a collective action problem. And so what I'm proposing as the way out is if we all just agree to adopt 4 norms, even if Congress never comes to our aid, even if Congress never does a damn thing to fix the mistakes it made in the 90s that set us up for this, including not just requiring no age verification, but saying, oh, and by the way, you can't sue the companies either. They have blanket protection from lawsuits for what they do to our kids.
Isn't that insane?
Yeah, so
Blanket protections from lawsuits. No age verification is already one major issue, but you're not going to have any repercussions for harming children.
well, no, because if you donate enough money to our politicians, they'll do whatever you
They
want.
certainly will.
So
Greedy bastards.
I want to bring up
Wow, man.
point 3 on this. So the phone-free schools.
Yeah.
I agree with that, but I want at the same time that every classroom, whenever there are students in the building, every camera is turned on and you can go to your schools. Every parent gets a passcode, and maybe there's like a press passcode or something like that
That's a
that you
really
can
good
get
idea.
that
Yeah.
allows you to see what's happening in every single freaking classroom.
Yeah.
And that's for liability sakes, but also to make sure that the crazies aren't turning your kids crazy as well.
Yeah.
But it's a good, and also for other safety's sake too, because then you could have networking. Like, God forbid another school shooting happens, but if somebody's watching it, they can alert earlier and tell people where the shooter is.
Right.
And I'm usually not down for, private surveillance and other stuff like that. But if they're public schools, that's a public place, and any public place you're in, you're being recorded, and it keeps the kids safe. It keeps the teachers safe. It keeps the teachers safe from the kids when the kids act up, and it keeps the kids safe from the teachers when the teachers act up.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah.
And
Give parents the right to monitor our classrooms.
And I would hate to say, I hate to
These
say
are our
that.
tax dollars. I mean,
I hate to say it, but we're moving faster and faster into a low trust society where we can't trust
authorities.
the
We should
people
be able to
that
trust.
spend
Yeah.
most of your kids' time is spent with their teachers, not with you.
Sadly. Yeah.
So I don't know, but yeah. So point 3, and then no social media before 16. Yeah, let the kids watch the YouTubes
Yeah.
and stuff, but No smartphones before. Hell, I didn't even have a phone in high school. I didn't get well, man, I didn't get a phone until I was like 20, 21.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah. And that, flip phones were all that was around when I was in my 20s.
I remember
we had pagers when I was a teenager.
Yeah, right. And then much more childhood independence and free play. It's like, yeah, like in real life, let the kids do the kid things, because the outside real world is actually safer now than it's ever been.
Yep.
Even with all this crazy stuff going on. But the internet world is a whole new frontier and is not safe, even for adults.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we got a few more seconds on this clip here. Let's finish this out.
So even if Congress never fixes the mistake, and I should say there is real hope for a bill, COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act. That is the one thing that Congress might do. State legislatures, including Florida and Utah, are actually doing, I think, a great job of trying out approaches that actually will make a difference.
I think that bill may have
But if we
passed.
just do these 4 norms, if nobody gives their kid a smartphone before high school, just give them a flip phone. That's what the millennials had, and they were fine. Okay, some of you may not think so, but in terms of the mental health data, the millennials were fine. No social media before 16. That's going to be the hardest one to do, and that's where we really could use legislative help.
Yep.
But we can do it even without that. Phone-free schools. This is an absolute. This one is easy. This one is the biggest bang for the buck. This one can be done all over the country by this September.
Yep.
You just buy phone lockers or yonder pouches, and you need the phone to get to and from school. I understand that. But if anything that can text must be locked up, because if they have anything, including a Chromebook, if they have anything that can text, and some kids are texting, they all have to be texting, because nobody wants to be the only one who didn't know about the thing that happened in third period. Yeah. So we have to go phone-free schools, and the kids love it once they detox. After a couple of weeks, their brains actually enjoy talking to other kids.
Yeah, go figure. I really like your suggestion of parents being able to monitor in schools. That would be something that would be great to add along with phone-free schools. And then much more childhood independence and free play. This is the next thing that we can use as a solution.
And we need much more childhood independence and free play. If we're going to greatly reduce screen time for kids, we have to give them back something fun, something normal, which is play with each other, hanging out with each other, having adventures with each other. Yes. So, and just a final note, I teamed up with Eric Schmidt, who has a variety of concerns about AI as a technologist, and then me as a social psychologist. We wrote an essay laying out how set aside the risks of whether AI is going to become sentient and wipe us all out. Like, let's just put all that stuff aside. Let's just look at what social media is currently doing to children and democracy.
Really?
What's going to happen as now everybody can use AI to fake everybody else? What's going to happen? It's going to get even worse for kids, even worse for democracy.
Yeah, by leaps and bounds. It's going to supercharge the effect.
It's going to take individual work to not, I don't want to say like not engage, like when it comes to all of like the AI stuff. Just not participate in it. Don't make it, or if you do make it, use it as, a way to help an art form.
Try and use it for good.
And then get really good at, like, because if you grow with AI, you can see that it's AI. Even like the really good AIs and their fingers are really good and all that stuff. I can tell. I can still tell that it's AI.
We have got to create the social norms and the social taboos that protect us from this technology.
The government's not going to be able to do it.
Unlike anything our planet has ever faced, this is exponentially beyond the printing press, way beyond the radio, way beyond TV, and even the internet and the advent of social media. AI is going to drastically change human civilization far more than any other invention in human history, and by magnitudes, multiples more than we, I think, can even foresee or predict at this point. It's going to get out of hand very quickly if we ourselves do not gain the wisdom to operate this godlike power responsibly. So going on to finish this little clip out.
So that's an argument that we made that Tristan and I will, I'm sure we'll be talking about in just a moment. And so that's my presentation to you. My argument is that the play-based childhood was replaced by the phone-based childhood, that we have overprotected our kids in the real world and underprotected them online. We have to reverse that. And that's it.
So that's the gist of that event. And I highly recommend you guys check that video out. It's the first in the list of videos for this episode in the description of this episode. And now we're going to move on to Jonathan Haidt on trigonometry. Now, if you guys are not familiar with the show trigonometry, it is absolutely awesome. It's highly recommended. And these guys are two comedians that started a podcast together. A lot of you, I'm sure, already know it very well. He had a great appearance on trigonometry not too long ago, actually, just back in August this year, a couple months back. Let's go ahead and get a little bit deeper into the details now. Here we go.
Oh, don't say that. Oh, no, you go sit in the, just let them work it out. Obviously, there are cases of bullying. We have to attend to that. But other than those limited cases.
Oops, I'm a little bit ahead of where we need to be. I just
Dum,
realized.
dum, 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 dum. We're going to get the sound button.
Take it down.
As well, in all of them, we see a very sudden shift in the early 2010s. It really is like a glitch in the matrix. And I argue in the book here that what it is there was a great rewiring of childhood that happened in those years. In 2010, almost all kids had a flip phone. The iPhone was just coming in, but it wasn't that popular. There weren't that many apps. It wasn't, social media wasn't on it. So in 2010, almost all kids have a flip phone or other dumb phone. There's no front-facing camera. There's no high-speed internet. You have to pay for every text you send. Yeah. So you can't spend your whole life. In 2010, teenagers are not spending their whole life on their phones. They're using it as a tool to connect and get together later. That's fine. That's normal childhood. By 2015, everyone's got a smartphone, front-facing camera, Instagram on the phone. We've got a lot of high-speed internet. You don't pay for texts anymore. So now, and there's so much going on. So the phone now becomes an experience blocker.
An experience blocker. That's a great term there.
All the experiences that a kid needs, blocked out by this. That's why kids born after 1996, or after 1995, are just really different from those born just a few years earlier. On average, obviously there are exceptions, but on average.
Obviously there are exceptions. So now Constantine is wise to ask the question, so what do we do now?
And I suppose the question is, given that all of this technology is here, we're not going to be able to Luddite our way out of it. We're not going to be able to smash them to pieces and whatever. So I guess it's a question of how do we manage this? How do we deal with the reality of modern technology, which, by the way, seems to me to be only going to accelerating from here.
That's right. So I have a whole email inbox where I send, every day I get emails from somebody who has an app or a website or something that's going to address the problem. And I don't even read them anymore. I just send them to this inbox and maybe someday someone will look at them. I've come to the opinion that there is no way to make the 9 or 10 hours a day that kids are spending on their phones, there is no way to make that nicer and safer. We're not going to smash the technology, but you know what? We can delay it. You know, when cars came out, they were amazing, and a lot of people died in them. A lot of children died in them. And eventually, we kind of realized we need safety features in the car. And you know what? You have to be 16 to drive. We're not going to let a 12-year-old drive a car. And I think.
So this is an important point, is that we do have ways in our societies to basically forbid the youth from certain things. You can't buy alcohol until you're a certain age. You're obviously not going to be able to buy a gun or vote and take part in society until you're old enough to be able to make wiser decisions, so drive a car, so on and so forth.
I think the same thing, we're going to come to that realization about social media in particular. Possibly smartphones. I just got back from the UK, and all the talk is, let's ban smartphones. Let's not let kids under 14 own a smartphone or not let them be sold. As an American, I'm not very fond of bans, but I think the norm needs to be, you know what? We're biological creatures. We're mammals. We have an evolutionary program called childhood. We have to let that unfold. Kids have to spend enormous amounts of time playing with each other, hanging out, teasing each other, unsupervised. No adult coming and saying, no, don't say that. Oh, no, you go sit in the, just let them work it out.
Let them work it out.
Obviously, there are cases of bullying. We have to attend to that. But other than those limited cases, let kids work it out. Let them get most of the way through puberty. This is a key idea in the book.
Yes, that's a really good point.
Well, that's where most, other than your infantile stage to 4 years old, that's another boost of brain growth and brain development is during puberty. So if if you can,
It's preparing you for adulthood.
if you can get past puberty, the
At least-
effects of the social medias won't
Won't be quite as
interfere with
pronounced.
the natural process of a young healthy
Adult
brain.
formation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it
Yeah,
does
let
make
the kids
sense.
be kids for as long as possible, and once they're towards the end of puberty, okay, maybe now it's safe to begin allowing them access. And this is very much kind of a compromise, because it seems like it probably would be wiser if we waited till 18 or even 25 when our brains were done developing to really start to access these technologies, because of just how powerful they are. But obviously, no one's going to abide by that.
I think 16 is good though, because
16 is a
that's
fair
when,
compromise.
That's when you can start working too.
Yeah.
You know, one way or another, you can get a job.
Yeah.
And
So you start taking on more adult-like responsibility and learning how to be an
Yeah,
adult. So at
which-
this point, yeah, it's a good time to introduce it.
But
right?
I would have to say that this shouldn't be a state issue. Like, I think if we don't want the state to come and crack down on it, we need to individually raise our families that way. And that's democracy is hard.
Yeah.
Because it takes individuals to uncorrupt themselves.
It takes moral, ethically bound individuals,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. So
Yeah, he speaks on that very well in this episode here, and we'll be getting to that.
but I do understand the necessity of the state. I get it. But
Sure.
if you don't want the state to do it, then let's do it.
Yeah, we have to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
First and foremost, regardless. All right, so here we go.
I really came to see that puberty is this incredibly important period where the whole brain is rewiring from the child form to the adult form, and it happens in stages from back to front, more or less. The last part to rewire is the prefrontal cortex. And this is happening, around 13 to 16 in that period. And it continues on to 25. But it's completely insane that when puberty starts, which is around 11 or 12 for girls and around 13 or 14 for boys, when puberty starts is basically when we give them a phone and say, how about no more real world experience? How about you spend 10 hours a day on this thing? And your brain isn't going to, neural rewiring is this incredibly complex dance. And just as if we gave our kids alcohol every hour, that would disrupt neural growth. Well, I would say giving them 4 hours a day of video games for the boys or 5 hours a day of video games for the girls, it's going to disrupt neural growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. So the way the brain rewires itself from back to front, and the executive function of the forebrain being the last part that is fully developed. So we're learning how to handle our lizard brain responses all the way up through.
Well, I guess first it starts from, the brain stem, and that's your heart, your lungs, how your internal organs work, and how you poop. And maybe a few other things, like reflex responses and other stuff like that might be in there. Then you get up into the back of the brain, and those are more of your primal responses. Then you get into the middle brain, and that's your, memory and your here now area, as well as, certain amount of motor functions. And then you go to the front, and the front of your brain is your decision maker.
Yeah.
That's where you make moral decisions. That's where you make pragmatic decisions. That's just where you make decisions.
And plan things out and execute them. Yeah. All righty. So now we're going to learn about kids losing imagination. This is something where Francis shares how he was actually formerly a drama teacher. I didn't know this about him. This is pretty intriguing.
He looks like a drama teacher.
Doesn't he? Seems like he would have been
dresses
a
so nice.
great teacher, man. He's such a
Yeah.
funny guy. So these guys are both comedians as well. Yeah, he would have been a great teacher. Let's go.
So I noticed, because I was a drama teacher, and a lot of drama teaching in the UK is you give children a set of stimulus, and then they create their own plays, improvised plays around a stimulus.
Very cool.
And I remember talking with the drama teachers halfway into my career, and we were going, I think kids are becoming less imaginative.
What year was this around? What?
This was around 2015,
Okay,
2016.
yeah, that's it. That
And
would
we
be it.
started to notice that the quality of work that the kids were doing was degrading.
And that would be expected, that the kids are losing imagination and how to execute on their ideas. The development is being limited. So,
Oh, there's only there's only so many options online. It's like,
Right.
You have a like, you have a share, a comment, subscribe, only so many places where you can put any amount of information in a certain process in which to engage with the machine.
Yeah.
How are you going to have an imagination with that? That's like no options.
You're taking in all this information. You're not putting much out. You're not learning how to execute on everything that you are taking in. And that's an important key. We need that reciprocal processing to be functioning. So, yeah, development limited going on.
There's a lot going on there. The one thing I can say with some confidence is the fragmentation of attention.
Yes.
This is very general. The ability, so the one thing the prefrontal cortex does is called executive function. It's the ability to make a plan, say, you know, like this morning, I said, okay, I would need to be here at 9:30, and I thought about the different methods, and I made a plan, and then I stuck to the plan because I have a normal prefrontal cortex. And if you disrupt that, if you're constantly, in the early teen years, if you're constantly being divided, you have all kinds of stuff coming in, that part doesn't develop as well. So this is one of the most common comments we hear about Gen Z, is that it's very difficult for them to stay on task. In fact, their brains have become accustomed to such a constant incoming stream of information that a lot of them have trouble watching a video because it's not enough stimulation. So they do this thing, there'll be, and people have sent me these things, there's like a video of me giving a talk, and underneath it is a video of a video game going on.
Yeah.
They need two things at once.
That's why people
if
are
they're at
making
the
this.
computer, they need the phone as well.
Yes, yes. Now, not only are young people doing this to excess, but haven't you done this before? I've done this where I have like a movie going in the background while I'm playing a video game or working on something else. And it's like, we really like having lots of stimulus to distract us from our thoughts, don't we?
Well, I'm constantly listening to podcasts and lectures and,
Yep.
All that stuff.
Well, that's healthy. But we really are addicted to stimulus, though, aren't we? And having time to loaf or having time to sit and contemplate and just be is actually really, really important for the brain to be able to work through and order everything out that it's actually picked up and learned, that's taken it from what it's taken in. So we actually need time for silence. And I know I myself, I see the report every week on my phone consumption and if I've gone up that week or I've gone down. And geez, I'm on my phone a lot, and I'm sure you guys are too, staring at that screen. So that's where things like podcasts are actually really nice because it's closer to our storytelling past where we're listening to something and then we're reflecting on it for a while. But we got to give ourselves that time to reflect on.
Well, I can get a lot more done than just sitting around reading the paper all the time. I can have people actually read the paper to me.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of podcasts and stuff are now. It's like, hey, look at this article we found. Let's go through the article.
Yeah, that's
Thanks, man.
exactly what we're doing right now, isn't it? So and it can be useful.
Well, it's a tool.
We just have to find ways to manage our use of these things such that we're not using them to drown out reality in an avoidant kind of manner.
Oh, yeah. Actually, for me personally, it helps quiet my mind down a little bit because if there's
That's why
not a
people do it.
podcast or other stuff, the brain, I internally visualize, I ain't got no problem not having it there. I'll just distract myself with something up here, which is not useful when I'm trying to do something and have to be able to see it. So, it's just like, well, I'm going to think about this building I'd like to build. My dream house, my dream mansion. What's going on? Oh, shit. Sorry.
I'm focusing. I need to focus.
Yeah. I put on the podcast so I can focus.
Well, that's where,
It's so weird.
techniques such as meditation are so helpful because we learn how to maintain our presence for longer durations of time and to be able to keep that attention focused in the way that we need it, and to learn how to just be and not be pulled around by our thoughts so easily and lost in their trains of thought and emotionally impacted by the random thoughts that just come up as our mind's trying to prepare us for life. And because, it's really good advice that I once heard. I love it. It's like, don't feed the bears. Don't feed the fears. Don't feed the thoughts. Don't believe the thoughts. Just notice the thoughts as they come up. Some are useful, some are not, but don't let your brain's executive function be supplanted by the fearful thoughts of the mind as they rattle on.
Unless you like, good horror and stuff like that, and you like scaring yourself.
Unless you like to scare yourself.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah, well, it's almost Halloween.
Hey, yeah, all right.
We have a
my
season.
favorite
We have a
holidays.
season for that, don't we? Isn't that an interesting one to have?
Yeah.
It's cool how we practice that.
Yeah,
We practice scaring ourselves, and we practice learning how to approach death. And
I'm poking fun at the devils. you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's gallows humor is a really interesting evolutionary advancement as well.
I got a good one. It's dark humor's like food, only some people get it.
Ooh, ooh, man. So,
yeah, but still, you
it's
know,
true
it's like,
and ouch at the same time.
yeah, the dark and the light. You got to have both, you know. God made both.
We need
so
it.
there
We
you
need
go.
we need to humble ourselves, guys.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna look at creativity and how our creativity has been impeded by social media, particularly for the young people in their formative stages of development.
And so this is inhuman. This is what we're doing to kids in preventing them from developing executive function is going to hurt them for the rest of their lives. So that's a very general comment. Now, as for creativity, that's quite possible. I haven't studied that. I don't have like a specific mechanism. But in general, you know, creativity requires you take in a lot of stuff and you put out stuff and then you get criticism. So you've got to have this back and forth with the world to be creative. But now that kids are basically taking in gigabyte, I mean, you know, 10, 50 times as much stuff as we did when we were young, the stuff is coming in, not a lot is coming out. And they're not doing a lot of writing. They're not writing books. They're not starting companies even. They're taking in so much stuff. So
Yeah. So we need that opponent processing. We need to take information in, and then we need to excrete something new as a result of what's inspired us, and then take more information in. But if we're not doing that give and take process, we're just taking in. We're inundated, and we're less able to learn how to turn all the new ideas we're taking in into new creative outputs.
Yeah.
And we are such a creative species. This is like one of our superpowers. We let this one weaken at our own peril.
Well, but we're constantly hijacked by our evolutionary adaptations, and one of them is to consume when you can.
They are double-edged swords.
You know, food, experience, other things, information, and particularly for a thinking species, which the only reason why we're the dominant species is because we think the way we do.
Think and figure. Yeah.
Information, even if it's crap information, just like crap food, you have a mechanism to want to take that in as much as you can when you can, because information, just like good food, is rare. And well, the internet's it's like a, you know, infinite breadbasket, but you have to weed through the breadbasket to get the nutritious stuff, but all the good sugary stuff that's going to kill you is right on the top. You know?
Yeah.
And brightly packaged with your favorite names like Facebook and Google and you know, like all that.
Yeah. So so now we get into Francis talks about poor communication and poor conflict resolution that he noticed while he was a teacher. This is also quite telling.
So what, you know, we need to develop one-on-one communication skills. And something I realized in writing the book is I had to deal with this question of, well, you know, aren't they playing online? Isn't that just as good? Aren't they socializing online? Like, what about a kid who's isolated? Here he has lots of friends. Isn't that just as good? And what I realized in writing the book is, no, actually there are 4 ways in which online interaction are not as good or very different. So the first is that real life is embodied. And just what we're doing now, just like the rules of, you know, like you guys are looking straight at me because I'm talking, but if I were to look straight at you while I was talking, that would be it's kind of weird because, like, you know, you don't do that. So you have to work out rules of eye contact. And we're all communicating with our heads. It's not just our mouths. It's like our head movements are a very important part. So anyway, there's all these nonverbal channels. Online, you get emojis and you get a lot of uncertainty. You say something, you don't know how it landed, and you're anxious until they respond. So it's embodied. Real life is synchronous. Right now we have instant, really rapid back and forth.
Yeah. Okay. So I totally mislabeled that one. Let me actually give you the part where Francis talks about his experience at schools.
And what was interesting as well is that towards the end of my time in education, I noticed that there were far more arguments, there were far more fights between kids because their social skills had diminished. So they couldn't find a way to negotiate conflict. And the people were like, oh, it's because they're spoiled. And I was like, I don't think it is. I genuinely don't think they know how to communicate effectively.
That's right.
And
So
then Haidt
we
responds,
we
as we
need to
just
develop
saw.
one-on-one
Yeah.
communications.
Yeah, so
Well,
let's
and
step
went
ahead
into
towards
because
that.
Well, yeah,
I'm
that's the
talking
thing. Looking people in the face, how to communicate back and forth between other people, like how to hold yourself and position yourself towards people.
Yeah.
How to just negotiate what your limbs are doing. You know, like we used to joke around. It's like, I never know what to do with my hands. Well, imagine not knowing what to do with your entire freaking body. You know?
Yeah. I remember experiencing that as a kid, actually. I remember some of that.
Well, that explains why you see like kids that will talk to each other while they're bobbing their heads like some stupid anime avatar character, or
Just
you know,
awkward. Yeah.
and
Just haven't learned
because
how
that's
to-
what they're learning it because they're looking at themselves on their little smartphone or whatever, make sure that they're framed up, and that's what they know. So they're trying to, you know, like do the thing and act the thing, opposed to real life interactions.
project an image rather than just be there and interact.
Yeah. It's a disembodied image,
Yeah.
essentially.
So let's go back to Haidt here, where he was finishing off.
you don't do that. So you have to work out rules of eye contact.
Yeah.
And we're all communicating with our heads. It's not just our mouths. It's like our head movements are a very important part. So anyway, there's all these nonverbal channels. Online, you get emojis and you get a lot of uncertainty. You say something, you don't know how it landed, and you're anxious until they respond. So it's embodied. Real life is synchronous. Right now we have instant, really rapid back and forth. And now on a Zoom call or in some video games, you have that. So some parts of the virtual world are synchronous, but most are not. It's text-based. I say something, you misinterpret it, and then you tell other people. And we lose that connection. The third is that real life interactions are mostly one-to-one, or in this case, one-to-two, one to a few. You hang out with a group of friends. But once it becomes like a group text, where a kid is posting and there's 80 kids, like the whole class is on this group text. It's not playful anymore. No. It's performative and it's anxiety provoking. Because you make
performative and anxiety provoking. I'm sure that everybody out there can relate to that.
one misstep and your reputation is trashed. So it's scary. It's anxiety provoking.
It's got to be incredibly
and then the final one is that real life communities in general are durable. Whereas online communities are evanescent. Maybe there's 500 people in a group, and most will be gone by tomorrow. Almost nobody's going to be there a year from now.
Yeah. Oh wow, that totally changes up the way that we value the encounter.
Yeah, and it seems like it's widening the interactions past what is naturally and normally maintainable, because like a conversation or a relationship between 2 to 3 people, pretty maintainable. It's like, hey, you're hanging out with your buddies. Yeah, remember we were talking about that one thing? Oh yeah, cool. Now 80, 100, 500 people on one little thread of text that you get in there, and it's, coming at you. Well, you can't maintain all that, and you're not, and chances are the people that you got pissed off about because they said something in there, and you went back, they probably don't have anymore because it's unmaintainable, so they unsubscribed from that network.
People are in and out, or the group's just there that day that you find it,
and it's
not sustainable. It's not maintainable over long durations of time.
Yeah, it's like trying to swim in waters that you're not
dealing
accustomed to.
Communication on a very low resolution scale.
Low resolution, high pace.
Yeah, very high pace.
Oh,
I could see why that would be so anxiety ridden.
Yeah, it's like being blind, but like driving a car.
I remember when I took online classes and we had groups and forums and chat rooms and all of that, and the relationships, you didn't make relationships with any of those people. And so the learning experience was totally different than if you were in the classroom with your fellow students and studying together and, doing projects together and getting the back and forth that you get with the teacher and one another. Whole different ball game. All right, so let's jump on and let's learn about not just anxiety and depression, but the rise of meaning, a sense of meaninglessness. We covered this in the 50X episode lecture series, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis by John Vervaeke, and you guys can look for that on this very channel. We went through that entire 50 lecture series to try and get to the bottom of what is causing the sense of meaninglessness in our world today and how we can help usher in an awakening from it, how we can help be that change that we wish to see in this world. And that's the heart of this podcast, that you are watching right now, guys. Thank you so much for being with us. If you like what's happening, make sure that you like and subscribe. And while you're at it, go on over there and give Trigonometry and Jonathan Haidt and Tristan Harris and the others that you see on this podcast today likes and subscribes as well. Let's help everybody reach more people. We are media.
Yeah, we're replacing it.
Yeah, we are. So here we go.
So kids need to be rooted in permanent communities. This is part of the human developmental plan. And in the online world, they just dip their toe into hundreds of little things. This, I think, is one of the major reasons why the thing that happens right around 2012, it's not just anxiety shooting up, it's not just depression shooting up, it's the sense of meaninglessness. There's all these really sad questions on these surveys. Sometimes I feel like my life has no meaning. Sometimes I think I'm no good at all. There's these really sad questions. And until 2012, the rates of agreement among American high school kids were very, very low. And then all of a sudden, right around 2012, as they move their lives onto the girls' social media, the boys' more video games, as they move their lives into the virtual world, they're lonely and they have a sense of meaninglessness. They're not rooted in anything. So this is why I call it the great rewiring of childhood. And it's become something inhuman, and we have to roll it back.
We have to. We have to find a way to reverse this trend and get our sanity back, get our comfort back, get our peace of mind back, because there actually is a more peaceful, less worry-filled world out there for all of us. So bullying, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, and it's not so cut and dry. Like, if you get rid of all bullying, then you get, weak people.
Right.
But if it's like, so there's general bullying where there's that one mean kid and everybody knows to stay away from him, but he doesn't directly just pick on any one person for any prolonged period of time, right? And then there's directional bullying, which I think is the issue, where you get one person that just goes after, or a group of people that just goes after one person.
They do that, and
makes
it
their
happens,
life,
and it's actually exacerbated by quite a large degree online.
Oh, now, well, yeah,
Online bullying.
Now online, you can
even be anonymous and bully somebody.
Oh yeah,
Just make a fake account
and just target them over and over and over again. And if you're online most of the time, well, guess what? Your bully's right there.
So here's Francis speaking on the bullying that he saw happening once Facebook came around. While he was a teacher, he was there for that change. So here we go.
So I was in high school. I qualified as a secondary school teacher in 2008. And I remember talking to the teachers, and they were saying to me, you know what, Francis, bullying, because I always worked in rough, tough schools. They were like, look, these are deprived kids, it's always been a tough environment. But the bullying since Facebook, and I'm not even talking about Instagram or any of the others, when Facebook came into this school, the bullying got so much worse. And to take your point, I remember when I was a form tutor being handed printouts from parents of messages these kids were sending to each other. It was vile, utterly, utterly vile. And you just go, this is incentivizing this type of behavior, because there is that. You can just say these things and there's going to be little to no pushback.
That's right.
Yeah, and that's where, like, the old style of bullying where you just got that, asshole kid, the troll running around the playground and stuff like that. Well, the teacher will catch him, or, enough people get together and be like, we're not going to put up with your shit, bully. Whereas, like, this online stuff, man, you can hit somebody one time and hit him with some nasty, horrible. And if you all have social media, maybe whose grandma just died. Or maybe like something, and really get them with
people
that.
Will say things that they would never say in person.
Oh, sure,
you can go so much further when you're online.
Because the kid getting bullied can also punch the bully in the eye.
Yeah,
you can't really do that online.
Yeah,
and I hate to be that way, but humans,
that's the way we are. And I mean, everybody's been in the Facebook debate where you're saying things that you would not say in normal life to that person, and you recognize that later on. I think that I'm not alone in that. I'm pretty sure that we've all experienced that.
That's why I don't do the active social media stuff.
I
got off of it because it turned me into a piece of crap that I didn't like. I didn't like how I was responding to people, even when I was trying to maintain being cool and like
Takes a heck of a lot of self-control and self-awareness to even begin to catch oneself on social media. That we're so easily manipulated by these social media algorithms. They're automatically tuned to show us the most upsetting stuff because those are the things that get the most clicks, and they're still geared that way. They haven't dialed this back yet, even with all the alarm bells going off. So we're having to change the way that we enact social norms, and wow, we're putting pressure on Congress to try and get some laws in place. So let's look at what happens when bullying peaks online.
That's right. And you say them to get the prestige, where you'd never say them directly to the kid face to face for a lot of them. So, what we call middle school in the United States, grades 6, 7, and 8, roughly ages 11 to 13. This is when bullying peaks. Around 7th grade is when bullying peaks. And these are very difficult developmental years, especially for girls. Their bodies are changing. They're insecure. They're being judged by their looks, by their breast size. But, it's such a difficult time for girls. And that's right when we introduce this crazy thing where everyone can say anything about anyone, often anonymously, and you take all the difficulties of adolescence, especially for girls, and you multiply them by 10. Oh, and then let's add in strangers. You can talk to strangers without your parents knowing. And, with all these platforms, they start off lovely, they start off fun, they start off playful. But any system you create, any ecosystem you create, unless you have an incredibly elaborate, evolving immune system, any system is going to be taken over by parasites, viruses, and exploiters. And so, for example, I'm just so horrified. One thing I learned about when I was in the UK is the rapid growth of sextortion. I'd heard about it for years.
Yeah, so we're going to get into that here shortly. DJ and I were just discussing that we're seeing that we're probably not going to get to cover the last video that we have in the queue for today. So we're actually going to do a part 2 of this.
It's going to be happier and like more
a little bit more solution
solution-based.
oriented, and it's also going to focus on the parenting side, whereas we've really been covering the social media effect here. But there is a movement known as gentle parenting that is out there, and excessive gentle parenting seems to also be exacerbating this crisis.
That's the other half.
Not allowing kids to be exposed to challenging situations that they have to resolve themselves, to learn how to do that instead of always go to an authority to fix the problem for them.
So because
Learn how to be adults.
This is the other face of the coin. We got this social media where we're just letting them be free, whereas social media probably shouldn't be that place. And we're not allowing kids to be free and make decisions for themselves in the real world, which we should be letting them do. So the next episode will be talking about the parents and what you can do. And sometimes it's okay just to be like, are you like, you hear them crying, are you bleeding? No. Is anything broken? No. You're fine. Go back outside. Like you're not
Don't leave yet, because we've got a good bit more. So we'll probably finish this one out around the 2-hour mark. We'll get as far through as this as we can. But yeah, let's continue on here until we find a good stopping point, and then we'll leave you guys until next week. So let us continue on. Oh geez, this one's so disturbing. This is horrifying. Here we go.
But apparently there's a Nigerian gang, the Yahoo Boys, and the trick, that strangers can talk to your kids, and they do this to boys because boys are stupid enough sometimes to send a naked photo. If a beautiful girl says, let's swap photos, and she's been flirting with them for a couple of days, boys are stupid enough or gullible enough or desperate enough to do it.
Yeah, all the blood has left the brain. The executive function is now depreciated greatly.
And the instant they send that photo, this person in the criminal gang says, now I've got everything I need to ruin your life. You have 30 minutes to send me $500 or I will ruin your life. I know all your contacts. I'm going to send this photo to everyone. I know where you live. And so, this is the idea that we're exposing boys to predators who not only can sextort them, but I read in one recent report, the FBI has linked 22 suicides of boys just to sextortion, which means there's probably hundreds of them, which means there are tens of thousands who are being sextorted and having their lives ruined. So the idea that in the most vulnerable, difficult transition from child to adult, We say, how about if you could all say things about anyone and you can be exploited by predators, and you get these TikTok challenges urging you to do stupid things like kick people's legs out while they're jumping so they fall on their head. I mean, crazy, crazy stuff. So we're not going to burn the technology, but we need to delay it. Yeah. You know, we can't be.
Yeah. We need to actually do something here because this is out of hand. I mean, that's so upsetting to hear. Our young girls and boys are experiencing the level of bullying and extortion that they're experiencing online. So, continuing on, giving kids back their normal childhood, giving kids back room to play and be independent would be so helpful for our young people right now and to save the next coming generations. Let's hear Haidt speak on that now, guys.
Raising kids on this stuff. This stuff is not suitable for.
It's not suitable for kids. So, jumping ahead.
How to do a better online form of interaction, and I'm so sick of it. So I say, you know, maybe for over 18s, yeah. For adults, let's have some better platforms drive out the bad platform. But you know what? For 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, no, just get rid of all of it. Get rid of all of it. What we have to do is give kids back normal human childhood. So a very important point I'm trying to make to parents, everyone's focus is on the phone stuff. You can't just take away the phones and the iPads and all the technology from your 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. You have to give them back something else, which is play. I'm sure okay, fond memories, go back to when you were 8, 9, 10. Mm-hmm. Think of a fond memory, say it. What do you see yourself doing?
Granddad's farm, playing, swimming in the river. Being
with Granddad? Who are you with?
No, with cousins.
Right, other kids, that's right. And this is exciting. It's thrilling. You take risks. Mm-hmm. You figure out how to swing. You throw a vine or a rope and you swing.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. And everyone out there, let's practice this together. We're just come up with a random great memory from your childhood, and most of the time you'll find that it was you doing something adventurous with your friends. I can remember playing on my grandparents' farm as a kid. All I had was the 2 dogs, sometimes the neighbor down the street to hang out with me. I can remember tons of adventurous experience with my friends in the local neighborhood that I grew up in, and all the craziness that we got involved in. Fishing out of the polluted drainage creek. Well, it was a creek, but it had sewer drainage coming into it. So we were fishing and catching these fish and actually roasting them on an open fire in the middle of the woods and eating these polluted fish. And that was a formative experience for me. We need these experiences. I know you've got some amazing experiences growing up on acres of land where you could just free roam and do whatever
I didn't
you
have
wanted.
friends, and the friends that I had,
But they were the animals in nature, I guess. Huh?
yeah. Well, there was the human ones too, but they were kind of mean.
Well, you learned how to
I could throw some crab apples. Let me just put it that way. They learned real quick. Don't throw crab apples at me because I will throw them at you and harder. But
you also learned how to be able to be solitary and
I loved
make the most out of it.
I loved being growing up on, it was like 360 acres of property with like 4 or 5 different distinct biomes on it.
And then when did you start playing music with your friends? How old were you then?
Not until like later in high school.
Later high school.
Like I was like, when I moved into Charlestown, none of my friends were kids. They were all derelicts and skateboarders.
Right. And you used to you used to play in drum circles when you were a kid too.
Well, yeah, my dad went
right?
through random hippie phases, and there was definitely some white people drum circles going on late into the night in our little townhouse in Amber Meadows. I do remember being in Amber Meadows though. A funny story. He's got this Wi-Fi antenna that he has this dome of aluminum foil over here, and it reminded me of a childhood memory of there's the weird kid that liked to collect bugs that smelled like bugs, and we'd go to his house and
that smelled like bugs.
Yeah, he liked to collect bugs and he smelled like bugs, and we'd climb this super tall pine tree and we put little handmade antennas all throughout the tree and like, like point them at Fort Detrick, which is right across the street, and, like, and then hook them all up to wires and hook them up into a little walkie-talkie thing. And yeah, well, I'm sure as hell you could pick up some of the stuff on there.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
we actually
That's a
had,
great example of a childhood adventure.
yeah, that was before I moved on the property by myself, which
Yeah, you guys share your favorite childhood moments in the comments here, and I think this might be a good place to leave it off.
yeah.
There was one more clip I had here. Let's close it out with this last clip, and then we're going to leave the rest for the next episode because now we are starting to get into the parenting side of it. But here we're just going to continue on this last point that Jonathan is making. So let's go ahead and let him finish this out. Let's go.
And you take risks and you might get hurt. That turns out to be really important. It's very important that kids need to sort of size up the risk, and each one has to adjust it to the level that he needs that day.
Yeah.
And if you let kids do that, they will occasionally get hurt. But at the end of the process, they really can judge risk.
Well,
What
that's
we
what
did
recess
beginning in
was
the
in
90s,
school.
because the backstory here, it's not just about the phones. The backstory is we got rid of the play-based childhood. In America, we freaked out about child abduction, but even in the UK, where you didn't have much of it, you still freaked out and lost trust in each other and got hyper concerned about traffic and said, no, we're not letting our kids out. So, what kids need is a play-based childhood. That's what they had until the 1990s, early 2000s. And instead, at the same time that we were locking them up and saying, no, you can't go outside unsupervised. Oh, but here's a personal computer and,
Or TV in your bedroom. I remember that started to become a thing. That you felt left out if you're one of the kids in school where you weren't allowed to have your own TV. And it's like having your own TV really started to become a thing. And as the technology got cheaper, of course.
Dude, I remember when it was cool to have your own wireless phone in your room.
I remember, so what we had when I was a kid was just extra long cords. So you could take
going
the
from the
family's phone.
kitchen so you could go into the dining room.
Yeah,
and,
if you're lucky, your parents let you put a phone in your room. And I
Yeah.
remember getting that around the time that I was around 14 to 16.
Yeah, because they were getting tired of like, the phone going off and then you
Yeah.
having to get up and it's, like 8:30, 9 o'clock and they're already upstairs and want to be in bed, but you got to go run over and grab the phone and they're like, nah, you better not let it ring more than once.
Yep.
Hey, buddy, what's up?
Yep.
And then if they wanted to, they could pick up on the other line really sneaky.
Oh, yeah, they
like,
could
and,
listen. They could listen in. Oh, yeah, I remember when I got my own TV, actually, my parents would not buy me a TV. I was 10 to 12, and I wanted a Nintendo. I didn't have a Nintendo, and the Nintendo had come
man.
out, and it'd been out for maybe a year or 2 or 3 at this point. I don't even know. All I had was the Atari 2600 I got for one Christmas when I was 6 years old. But now I'm around, the age of 10, I believe it was. I was old enough to start mowing the lawn, and that's the deal my parents made with me. They're like, well, you can mow our lawn and any neighbor's lawns that you can get to mow. And when you save up enough money for a TV, we'll take you to buy a TV. And then when you save enough money for your Nintendo, we'll take you to get the Nintendo. And so that's what I did. I mowed lawns after lawn after lawn after lawn after lawn until I saved up enough money for a TV. It was around $200 or so. And then I saved up another $100 and something and got a Nintendo at a garage sale with 3 games. The Mario Duck Hunt, like dual on the same cartridge. And so that's Mario 1. And then Rad Racer. And that was a great game. That's actually one of Square's first games before they ended up making Final Fantasy along with Nintendo, the very first Final Fantasy. But it's a fun game, Rad Racer. And then what was the third game? I can't remember now. It's been that long.
Probably like what? Well, no, this is probably before the original Legend of or Zelda or whatever that.
Oh, was it Zelda? I really wanted Zelda because that was the first Nintendo game I saw. I remember that. It's like, whoa, this is amazing. It really broadened my imagination of what was possible. I didn't know that,
You don't just go
games
left
could
to
be
right.
that
You
way.
can go left, right, up and down, and you
there's
can
a
jump.
world. There's a world that you actually journey around.
Yeah.
First Zelda, you didn't jump, but Zelda 2, you did.
Yeah.
That one
yeah,
was a
that's
side
right.
scroller. Yeah. But yeah, man, I have some great fond memories of video games as a kid. But boy, did video games become an addiction for young men. And
Well, dude, just check out Star
Yeah.
Citizen and like and good on Star Citizen, because like what they're doing is building fantastic ship models and stuff. But you can easily spend $1,500 in that game on ships that are ships in the game and real money.
I've heard about this game, yeah.
Now, mind you, you can grind and buy a lot of the ships, like most of the ships, except the newest ones and the capital ships. You can buy them with in-game currency, which,
oh man,
if you like the grind,
we're still on small screen here.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, we only got like 40 more seconds, so let's go ahead and finish this clip out, and then we
has a dial-up modem, and look,
out.
you can play video games, and you can talk to your friends. And so in the 90s and early 2000s, kids were shifting over to virtual interactions. Their mental health didn't collapse then, actually. It was actually pretty stable in the 90s, especially in the 2000s, pretty stable. It's only once they make the jump from flip phones to smartphones, that's when you go from playing a bunch of video games at home on the family computer to I have the entire internet with me all the time, and I can be flirting with strangers who claim to be sexy women. You know, you get the craziness once you get this all the time. That's why 2010 to 2015, that's the key period when everything collapses.
And that's it. All right, guys. So I think that's enough for this episode, y'all. We're going to pick up on this next episode. We might take a week off.
No, we're definitely going to take a week off. Announcement. We've got new gear. Some of it we're using tonight, but more of it we got to figure out how it works, because that's just how it is.
It's going to take some time to set up the new video switcher. But we got a new board here. Hopefully it sounds good to you all.
A little bit better. Not perfect yet, but new stuff.
We got it put together pretty fast today, though.
I'm just gonna give it to Rode. The Rodecaster Pro 2.
It's awesome.
Pretty much plug and play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fun new toy, and it's empowering us over here. So thank you so much, Rode. You guys create and engineer some amazing equipment. This is a powerful tool, and we're really excited. And we're going to get the video switcher up next week. We're going to play around with the lighting. We're going to do some stuff, play around with the camera a little bit and make some adjustments. Yeah. So we'll see you guys a couple weeks now. Go back and go through our library. We have a ton of videos. You can also find Actuali podcast everywhere podcasts are found. And there's a lot of old episodes that aren't even on YouTube. You got guided meditations and deep philosophical introspections covering Bruce Lee and Jiddu Krishnamurti and all kinds of fun stuff for you guys there. So absolutely check us out. Like and subscribe, throw it on comments and ratings everywhere that podcasts are found. And of course, here on YouTube as well, guys. Your actions, every like, every subscribe, every comment helps us tremendously. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast growth. We have only just begun, and though we have a long way to go, we are here and we're loving it and having a lot of fun and appreciating every single one of you guys out here supporting us. So thank you so much for being a part of Actuali Podcast. I truly do believe that we can change this world from the inside out, and that we're alive during the most exciting point in human history. As hard and troubling as it may be, we are positioned. We have the technology. We are in a place to where we can affect the change that we need to make it through this juncture and perhaps become the great stewards that we have the potential to be, and maybe even become an interplanetary species. Who knows? Let's see if we can earn our way out into outer space and meet other life forms. So this has been a lot of fun. It's a somewhat depressing episode, but we hope that we've given you guys a handle on some of the things that we can do, such as Haidt's 4 potential avenues towards solution that he laid out for us. And let's start enacting that change and being that change that we wish to see in the world. Love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you in a couple weeks. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
And we will be seeing you next time. Let's go ahead and dance our way on out of this piece. Oh yeah. This is where wherever you go.
my obligatory. Oh, switched us over.
Oh, you can't see her anymore.
No, we messed it up. Hey, but if you're here to witness it, you're one of those good ones. Yeah. All right. Well, I got nothing else to say.
Peace
Bye,
out.
farewell.
We
If you just say I'll do it.